The preservation of and increased access to the 92nd Street Y Humanities Audio Archives is generously funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Paul Goldberger, moderator of The Shape of the City. I figure after 7 years I've been introduced enough so I ought to be allowed to come out by myself. Thank you. Before I introduce tonight's guest, a couple of words both about the format for this evening and about future events. First, to the future calendar in this series. 1 week from tonight, Alan Greenberg, designer of the public rooms at the Department of State in Washington, the new facade of Bergdorf Goodman, and numerous other classical structures of our time, will be here at 8 o'clock next Tuesday here in Kaufman Hall. And a very special event on Sunday, April 7th at 4 o'clock. The first time this series has met on a Sunday afternoon. Arata Isuzaki from Tokyo will be here, the architect of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles, the Palladium Discotheque in New York, one of the most celebrated architects not only in Japan but in the world, whose work is the subject of a major retrospective opening at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles on March 17th. He will be in the United States for an extended period as a result of that show, and will be here at the Y on April 7th. That's an event added to the calendar. It's the 7th of the events in the Shape of the City series, which was originally 6 events. So those of you who have series tickets need to make special arrangements to get your tickets for this one. Please do so at any time. Tonight the format, as always, begins with a short slide introduction. The heart of the evening will be an unstructured, informal conversation, and then we'll conclude with questions from any of you. As usual, please write questions on index cards that the ushers can give you, and at any point during the evening, they'll come up and down the aisles, pick them up, and deliver them to the stage. I'm very pleased that tonight Charles Moore is with us, one of the most celebrated architects of the last generation, and winner of the gold medal, the highest award the American Institute of Architects confers this year, just awarded at a dinner in Washington 3 weeks ago. Charles Moore is the former head of the architecture department at Berkeley, former dean of the School of Architecture at Yale University, which is where I first knew him when I was a student, formerly a professor at UCLA, and now distinguished professor of architecture at the University of Texas in Austin. He is known, one of the very few people in our time, in fact, who is as well known as an architect and as an author and teacher. I first encountered his writing long ago in I think, truly brilliant essay in Perspecta, the Yale Architectural Journal in 1965, called "You Have to Pay for the Public Life," which is an essay that I still look back at as the beginning of the academic field we might refer to as Disneyland studies. He was the first scholar to have ever looked seriously at Disneyland. He has also written The Place of Houses and Dimensions, among other books, and has designed a wide range of buildings that attempt to put his views into built form, from Sea Ranch in Northern California to the Hood Museum of Art at Dartmouth, the new museum at Williams College, the Beverly Hills Civic Center, the World's Fair of 1984 in New Orleans, and numerous other projects. It's a great pleasure to be able to welcome Charles Moore. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I close enough to this thing? What I'm about to do is show entirely too many slides entirely too quickly, but that will give a sort of unfocused flavor, I hope not altogether unfocused, of some works from the Sea Ranch that Paul mentioned 25 years ago, to some works that are, one of them's in last month's architectural record. So most of them will be pretty recent. This is the Sea, whoops. This is the Sea Ranch condominium, 10 houses on the California coast north of San Francisco, 100 miles north of San Francisco, which gave us our first chance to deal with the nature of the land and the wind and make buildings that were not subservient to the land nor trying to dominate it, but we hope in some kind of equal partnership with it. A more recent picture, much less wild than it was 25 years ago, because all the trees we planted have grown all that while. With a courtyard that we discovered we had to have and make wind-free, or you'd get swept into the surf from on your way from your car to your front door. Nobody, as far as I know, has had that happen to them. It's too cool to ever be really comfortable, or more than occasionally be really comfortable outside, so what would otherwise be gardens are in. There's big bay windows, so you can feel the teeth of the winds. This is in my own house there. Place to sit in the corner, and outside in the white blur is rocks and seals. Made with a structure that we were very excited about, that was simple enough so that we could figure out where every beam would go. And with special places, like this is in my house again, a bedroom which had a tent. It hasn't been pulled down in years, but it used to pull down and had a zipper in it, which I don't know why I thought that was like Rudolph Valentino, but here's a picture from long ago, and a picture in a new jazzy phase of the same place. One of my pleasures is repainting that kitchen every few years. Makes it seem like a new house all the time. Now we jump most of 25 years to Oceanside, a town in San Diego County in Southern California next to Camp Pendleton Marine Base, where the problem, it was a competition which we won, was to make a civic center next to a couple of tiny little Irving Gill buildings that are in the City Hall and library that are in the upper right corner of this 4-block site. We managed to persuade them that they needed a place to cool off the water for the air conditioning equipment. and to make places that look Irving Gill-like, simple, but with a whiff of exotic. The library, it's part of it. And plain white walls, very austere and cheap. Leading up to a front door in front of or behind a fountain and chandelier. This is a civic center that won a competition a few years earlier than Oceanside in Beverly Hills. It's, I think, going to be finished, going to be dedicated next week or the week after, finally, 10 years later. There's an existing 1930s City Hall there on the left, and the competition was to deal with all the buildings that would go around that to try to turn what was, at that point, a number of buildings facing onto parking lots and away from each other into a connected place with some of the magic that Beverly Hills has, as you know from the TV. The idea was to make an access to take advantage of the big space we had and the longest free space on the site, and then to make a set of ellipses, sort of beads on a string, to bring the outdoors into the scene. They go down, as shows maybe a little better in this section, to a lower ellipse in front of a stone boat that is supposed to be something like the Dowager Empress had made with the money that the Western powers gave her for a navy in her garden near Beijing. She had an easier time of getting it than we have. Also from Beijing is this ramp. It's supposed to be something like the emperor got whisked up in his sedan chair in the Forbidden City. It's this time for the handicapped, of course, with water pouring down the edges when a new administration comes and lets us put in the pipes. The scale and everything about it are meant to be like the original building, which you see in the background to the left. But with tile used instead of the sort of pastry tube ornament that the old building had. This is the last ellipse down in front of what was going to be the theater. This is the library, and a place in the middle of quite a big library to reorient you to the outer doors. And a room that they put their own kind of furniture in. The piece that got away, of course, is the dearest to us. It's a 550-seat theater and opera house and city council chamber, but they had a spasm of saving money and didn't build this one. There's a section through it, full fly loft, and an entrance that we thought smacked suitably of Barcelona at the turn of the century. Model of the chamber. Here's one that isn't a competition winner. We just got the job. It's a church. There are more pictures of it in the current architectural record, but it's a Catholic church, Church of the Nativity, in a very Hispanic sort of edge of Rancho Santa Fe, which is a nice older, the Spanishy place near San Diego. This is called Fairbanks Ranch, and there's a part of it that's on flat land that's devoted to institutions, and we are trying to keep it so that you feel like you're going in past an orchard, which, as you see, turned in more to cars than trees. And we got the middle part built and are soon about to start in some classrooms in the upper part of this plan. In the part that's built, you enter into a narthex with a baptistry to your left. Whoops. In this plan, there wasn't a commons yet, but there down the lower left, you see it. It got built, and then the church itself and a little chapel beside it. Here's the courtyard. The commons is over to the left, and the church to the right. And the time comes. And the main front doors to a baptistry. And doors to the right into to the nave, which owes a lot to Luis Barragan and the priest's passion for Luis Barragan. The sanctuary keeps getting made more detailed, but this was in the old days when it was simple. And the last one, in Berlin, again a competition winner, and recently mostly finished. Yeah, this is Tegel Harbor, and has housing on the near side. I have a magic machine here that I've forgotten how to work. Along this side is housing by us and a German firm that had won a previous competition for the same site, turned out. And then with 8 apartment blocks by Robert Stern and Stanley Tigerman and John Haydock over there, and Antoine Grumbach and Paolo Portuguese. This was a different scheme, and us. It's a different scheme, but the idea was to have our own sort of mini architecture exhibition. Then, so far, only the library of the cultural center has been built, and we hope someday soon an indoor swimming pool will happen. It's fun doing low-income housing in Berlin because they don't see it as some punishment they're dishing out to people who haven't earned enough money. And the developer for this was part owner of a precast concrete company in West Germany, and so was able to do a lot more with the surface of this building than one can generally do with low-income housing. Courtyard is on the way to the tower building with our attempt to let you know when you were home. Seems to me the one major horror of public housing projects is the ease with which you could get into the wrong apartment and cause great destruction. The apartments inside are mostly perfectly standard, but up under the roof, some of them got to be quite special. And so those are the ones that got photographed. The library, the Humboldt Library, after one of the brothers Humboldt, who lived in the Schlierslein Tegel by Carl Friedrich Schinkel, just out of sight to the left, is here. I think this shows it as well as anything. It's a simple long building with a lower vault and then an upper vault, and the sun shines in from the south against the gray upper vault, and the lower vault is not entirely solid, so you can see up through it and get at once a sense of being quite cozy and of being in a building the size you need. Right. The building from the other side, and a series of pictures. Here you could probably see better here than elsewhere, the nearer vault and then the bigger one with a sort of curving wall of books, 2 stories high down the length of the building, with a balcony at the mid-level to which the stairway leads. And so we take leave of beautiful Tegel, and I go sit on that's it.
Day when the screen goes up and the furniture flies down and lands there. Let me ask you a question that comes somewhat from the slides and somewhat from things you've written over the years. Your work probably deals more openly with fantasy than that of almost any other architect. How do you keep fantasy from becoming either trite or cute? I mean, it seems like you're very good at pushing the line without going over it. How does one find that line, or is that a concern of yours when you're designing?
I think it's mostly inadvertence and a certain amount of relaxation. There are a number of architecture critics, even some at local universities in this very city, who have a morbid dread of falling into schlock. And I guess they think that hell will open up at that moment when they fall into schlock. And I think, well, I don't think hell will open up. And I think falling into schlock every once in a while is probably just fine. And some commissions actively seek it. And I think that being relaxed on that count is essential to somebody trying to make something happen. I'm much more concerned with the tendency of buildings to become mute, and I think that through most of this century, we've been so uptight about what our buildings should say and their zeal to be the most important thing in the world, whether they were a two-car garage or a branch savings and loan, that we've shut them up unduly. And I think that if you let buildings say, we help them say what they want to say, sometimes they will say something quite corny or stupid, but you shouldn't take that as a reason for shutting them up any more than you shut up people because they sometimes say things corny and stupid.
Do you think we, as a culture, take our buildings too seriously?
I think we're bored by them, and I think that's too often, and I think that's the worst thing that can happen. And I think one of the reasons we're bored by them is that we keep feeling as though they must be the most important. Each thing, each little house, each garage must be the most important damn house or garage or whatever that has ever been. At least architects think this. The clients just want to build them and please get them in more or less near the budget and get them over with. But I think certainly we architects take buildings much too seriously, and render them less helpful to us thereby.
You know, just today, actually, I was reading a description by an architect who shall be nameless of an extremely large house he designed, in which it said that I replaced the traditional imagery of house with a series of layered spatial transformations, or a series of layered cubist spatial transformations, or maybe it was a series of layered transformations investigating cubism's spatial implications.
I used to keep a collection of things like that.
And it all seemed to me to be sort of a cover for the fact that this house actually looked like a factory and not like a house. One of the other things that seems to me to be a theme of your work, and maybe you can speak a little bit about this, has been finding ways to accept traditional, conventional imagery without necessarily lying down and playing dead in front of it. Your houses seem to deal in houseness, as our culture believes houseness is interpreted, or churchness, or bankness, or what have you. Yet they don't look precisely like the models you see in, a little toy train set either.
I think it's been one of the problems among billions of others of our century that people don't trust their own likes and dislikes. That when young men and women arrive at an architecture school, more often than not, they're told that everything that they have loved up till that point, their house, their street, the things that are familiar to them and lovable, are architecturally hopeless and don't have the right architectonic vibes, and they should forget them as soon as possible and do a series of generally extremely dreary exercises that their teachers have in mind for them. And again, I think relaxation is very helpful because people who haven't been brainwashed in an architecture school much more often remember with some fondness the house they grew up in, even if it wasn't a pure style or a minimalist statement. And it seems to me to get back some of our perfectly, they're easily accessible, and what's available to all of us, enjoyment with stuff we're familiar with, is devoutly to be desired and relatively easy to do if we relax a little. And I guess what I'm saying is that I like to do that. I like the house I grew up in, which was colonial. And
it's interesting that you've used the word relaxation so much, because I've always felt your work, probably more than anybody practicing today, has a very openly sensuous aspect to it. I mean, it seems to be about the way it feels as much as anything else.
you know, one of the books that I was a co-author on is called Body, Memory, and Architecture, and I was very excited at the discoveries Kent Bloomer and I kept making during the writing of that book, that appreciating a building or architecture is a matter as much of the whole body as it is of the mind and the eyeball. That what you do with a building is not only look at it as you look at a photograph, but you move through it and react to it, and it's full of surprises and easy spots, and a set of complex rhythms that get built up that are not one-shot affairs, but differ almost every time you go through that building or enjoy it, even in your mind's eye, in your memory.
Let's go back to the whole issue of conventional buildings and your colonial house that you grew up in, for example. A few years ago, it would have been very radical to hear somebody in your position stand here and say, I like the dumb old suburban colonial house that I grew up in. Now, in fact, it's, despite the tone in which you presented those words, they're not, in fact, so radical. It's something that a generation of younger architects, because of you and your work, Bob Venturi, Jane Jacobs, Bob Stern, and dozens of other people have heard many times before. How do you view the whole kind of movement of historicism, romanticism? I'm doing anything I can to avoid the phrase postmodernism, but I'll give in and use it. That in some ways is responding to things you were doing as early as the late 60s. How do you see yourself? How do you see it? How do you see yourself in relation to it? And so forth.
I see myself, I'm very proud to be in relation to most of those words, not all, but most of those words you mentioned. I'm a touch freaked still by the coming and going of postmodernism, and I know it went because the same critics who had been saying that it hadn't come and never would were the first to say that it had died, which I thought was interesting. I think what happened to what I still think is a perfectly good and useful idea, one that I feel very strongly about, that people can enjoy a great many things from a great many times, and that our own memories mush them all together, and so that it's counterproductive to try to cut out or cut apart from the rest the okay memories, and try to ditch the rest. I think that is an idea that was worth considerable pursuing. What seems to me happened is that it, very soon after postmodernism was named, it turned into a set of orthodoxies and cliches, and finally, instead of getting dreary crackerbox-shaped modern buildings, you were getting dreary crackerbox-shaped buildings with a trick temple slammed on the front, and they were postmodern, and quite appropriately, people decided they were disgusting. But I don't think that that invalidates the rest, and I feel very proud of any help that I've been in just opening up what it's all right to like. And also, I'm proud of whatever part I've had in taking away some of the stigma of admitting where the sources were for the first half of this century and well beyond that, to admit that you'd ever seen something that you just did a building that looked like was thought to be unspeakable and in very bad taste. You must pretend that you had never seen the Empire State Building, which is very hard and silly to do. But I think by now, and certainly I didn't do it alone, but as you say, a number of people have been pushing for these things, and now it's perfectly all right to say that this kind of reminds me of the house I used to live in Santa Fe, even, and that seems to me all to the good.
That seems to bring us very naturally to another issue, which is, now that you've won the gold medal, how do you feel as a kind of part of the professional establishment, as somebody who's actually been outside of it for most of his career? Do you feel that that represents an affirmation or a co-optation, I guess, is sort of the question.
I used to be accused, because I was a dean during the 60s at Yale yet, of co-opting student revolutionaries the whole while, and I would admit it. And so I don't see co-opting as all that bad an idea, and if co-opting is, I'm very pleased to be co-opted. No, I keep wondering what to do. There must be some great usefulness to having a gold medal of the AIA. Like I could tell a whole mess of people off, but I can't think of anybody I especially want to tell off. And I don't think they would pay any more attention than they would have before I got the gold medal. So I think what I better do is just keep it to where annually at my secretary went and got a bank of safe deposit box for it, because it turns out to be made of real gold and not very many carats.
But it does seem to suggest that the mainstream has moved toward you a certain amount, does it not?
I like to think so, after having spent the last 1,000 years shouting about how things ought to change in favor of what I believe in. I'd like to think that it's moved, however imperceptibly, toward those things that I was earlier talking about that I do believe in. And Vincent Scully said at the presentation ceremony that it had, and I was pleased to have that affirmed, that he talked about it in terms of vernacular, that the vernacular styles that didn't seem to be worth much attention a few decades ago now are taken as not taken seriously, but taken as fruitful sources of excitement for us. And so if that's happened, great. And if I got a gold medal because it's happened, that's maybe unfair, but it's great too.
Yeah, no, I think there's no question that it's happened. And I think vernacular really is the issue, because your work is very different from, or as different in its way from Alan Greenberg's as from Charlie Guathmy's. I mean, it is it not? Is that a...
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
If we made a continuum, we would find you in the middle there.
Being between Alan Greenberg and Charlie Guathmy. Yes. Now there's something I thought would never happen. Yeah, both of them, though it's a continuum that works in several directions, because both of them feel much more strongly than I do that something is the right, the proper thing to do, and
right.
Most other things are distinctly not. And the two of them differ on what is proper and what is not. But they share that
Right.
that sense, that high moral tone.
Well, architecture is ideology.
And the vernacular
Right.
pulls down from that, with me pulling hard.
Sure. Let me switch gears a little more, thank you, toward the question of practice. You've always had a very unusual way of practicing. I mean, as somebody who's a teacher and a writer as much as a practicing architect, but you've also not had a large bureaucratic office that you've run and it's been a continual base, but rather sort of set up sort of little almost nomadic architectural camps wherever you happen to be that grew up around you, many of which have flourished as independent practices when you've moved on to another teaching position and to start another small office around you. It's a way of practicing that nobody else has ever, I don't know if anyone else has ever even tried it. Certainly no one else has succeeded at it. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, clearly I haven't succeeded at it. I haven't gotten so I make money yet. But I think it comes from in my case, from a kind of fear. Others may have fears of falling into schlock, and I guess my fear is of getting organized and being responsible for all these people taking home a paycheck to their wives and children and not starving to death. And it's just so tempting to, when one of these gets started, to remember that I have a date thousands of miles away and drift off. I mean, people are always doing that in movies, usually Westerns. And I think it's a perfectly ordinary thing to do, but it doesn't go with having the responsibilities of an eternal type architect's office.
Mm-hmm. Good. Another theme that goes through a lot of the work you showed us, as well as a lot of the other work that you didn't show today, is the idea of the building as a kind of village or community. We do see that very much at Beverly Hills Civic Center and the San Diego project, and some of the stuff you didn't show, like Kresge College at UC Santa Cruz. A lot of other stuff, and even a lot of the individual buildings seem designed as if they were bunches of elements rather than a single perfect object. Can we talk a little bit about that theme of things coming together, things being parts of other things, making villages and communities rather than individual objects? Has that been a conscious intention?
I guess much of the time it has. Somebody named Robin Boyd wrote a book about, probably it was about Australian architecture years and years ago, that classified buildings. This must have been in the 50s when there were fewer kinds of buildings than there are now. And he classed buildings as being either a suitcase or a bunch of grapes. And the suitcase ones were like, modern buildings look, and you jammed everything inside. And the bunch of grapes ones let you hang the pieces out wherever you had room and program and felt like it. And most of the time I find myself advocating trying the admittedly odd-shaped suitcase, but then increasingly I have the looser pleasures associated with the bunch of grapes, I don't do it as passionately as say Frank Gehry does. He really breaks those buildings down, and I change my mind when I get it about half undone and try to glue them together again. I think that the two, and what Robin Boyd was, I think, trying to get at in his classification is that either one is all right. Mm-hmm. And there's something about little things that's most of the time nicer than big things. In most American places, it's hard. New York is a special case, but in most smallish American cities, what there is that we like is almost always small, and what we are adding to it is almost always big, and almost all of us do a really lousy job of pretending that the supermarkets are in some way good neighbors to the little houses that they're too often meant to be good neighbors to. Now, I haven't figured out how to make a supermarket look like a nice little row of houses. Actually, there are some houses in the Washington area that look like nice little rows of, each one is a house, but they look like rows of houses, and they don't kid any of us.
There's certainly a lot of houses that look like supermarkets, though.
Yeah, and I haven't yet found it in my heart to feel that that's all right. But the problem of making cities of bigger and bigger pieces without doing damage to the parts we almost always love about cities, and again, New York is an exception. One can love a 100-story building.
It's a stretch.
Nah, the Empire State Building still looks okay. And the Chrysler Building looks much better than okay. In most places, it's very hard to make that stretch. Not that I know what to do about it.
Okay. We have a rich array of questions, so I'm going to turn turn to them for a little while. Start with something very general. What buildings of your own design and of someone else's do you hold most near your heart? And this one has two parts. The other one is just as specific. What place that you've been to, lived in, or visited do you consider one of your most incredible experiences or memories? This question is basically, tell us what you like, is what it boils down to.
All right. In this hemisphere, I guess Mr. Jefferson's University is my favorite single place because it does all these things I've been loudly advocating. Lucan's museum in Fort Worth is maybe my second most favorite place, and it packs everything into a sort of corrugated suitcase, very corrugated. I also like Machu Picchu, but I don't know as much about the people who did it. Don't know anything about the people who did it. I could put in a good word for Chartres Cathedral and maybe the Athenian Acropolis. But there, and before it fell apart in the present bad air of Athens. But I don't know how much of the Athenian Acropolis I like because of Pericles and words that got spoken upon its flanks, and how much because of the wonderful shapes in the Greek air. I know that the Athenian Acropolis moves me much more than Machu Picchu, although Machu Picchu is far more vertical. And I take it that's because the buildings are part of a set of sentiments that I feel, and even ideas that I feel more connected with than the Incan ones that I don't know what they were.
The other part of the question was buildings of your own design. Do you want to?
Well, I like, it's a terrible thing for a middle-aged architect to admit, but I like the Sea Ranch condominium probably better than any other, partly because I've had a house in it for the last 26 years. And when I look around it even now, every stick that's in there and every piece of hardware and everything is a function of a decision that was made by Messrs. Moreland and Turnbull and Whitaker and Marvin Buchanan on some distant day, and everything got dealt with. And when I look around, some of the things I see represent disagreements that I lost, but that doesn't make them any less dear to me. What the pieces of my own work that don't interest me much are ones that I wasn't altogether in on, and that have piles of decisions made, not that I disagree with or agree with, but that I don't know where they come from or why they were made that way. And I guess that explains some of why I was saying some of the things I was saying earlier about scale and involvement, and why I like to design with other people so that everything is a voiced issue rather than sitting in some sort of torpor all by myself and drawing out a lot of stuff.
Sea Ranch really has taken on a kind of iconographic status in the last 10 years or so. It is,
Yeah, it's fun to remember back to when people were writing us poison pen letters threatening us with doom and extinction because we had designed the thing so ugly and disgusting. And now nobody dares to say that. And indeed, there's a window I would like to cut in my house that, because there's one corner of it that doesn't get enough air circulation. And I can't because it's a monument.
so it's a landmark. You can't change
It's a
it.
landmark. Granted, it's a Sonoma County landmark. It's not, doesn't have worldwide status, but it still keeps the air from going in that corner of my room.
The price of success, the curse of success. The site in general has continued to be developed, right? And there are other buildings that have come up around it.
Lots.
Yeah.
We're even doing some of them, and some pretty nice ones, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But the place got a little too greedily developed at one middle stage, and the questions that we thought we were raising of how to make buildings fit with the landscape have turned into other questions of how to make buildings fit with the building next door,
Right.
which turned out we didn't have very
So
good
in
answers for.
fact, you're facing urban issues more than natural context issues.
Yeah. And facing them without without the agreed on format for making decisions. So there's a architectural board there that has to look at this endless flood of new homes designed by architects in Sacramento for clients from East Sacramento, and neither of whom, as nearly as I can make out, has ever set foot on the Sea Ranch.
Right.
And so we don't get to face, I'm not on the board and never will be, they'll see to that. But there just isn't the basis for figuring out what's to be done that one would hope for in a more organized arrangement for an urban place.
Let's move on to a couple of others. You said that most clients are happy as long as architects stay within the budget. Your public housing in Berlin seemed more beautifully designed than Battery Park City in New York, a project of yours I did not mention earlier. How did you stay within the budget? I presume that means in Berlin, not at Battery Park City, although you might want to speak about either one or compare the two.
It's easier to know what's going wrong in Battery Park City because they're all speaking English. And the ways, well, I mean, this is speaking before the wall came down, but West Berlin was a curious place that the West German government was extremely anxious to have people in, and so they made it more pleasant to do buildings there than they might have in other places, or than they did in other places. Well, for instance, young men who moved to Berlin were not subject to German conscription, and so a lot of people moved to Berlin who might not have otherwise. Now that it's the center of united Germany, I suppose they could peel off our precast concrete walls and send them out to Frankfurt or something. But one hopes they won't. We have, and I think architects have to be serious about meeting budgets, and we have elaborate ways of ourselves hiring cost estimators while the clients simultaneously hire cost estimators, and the two cost estimators have at one another and come to some number that meets everybody's approval. And the main thing about it is that it's serious, and it has to be. But the rules are different for every kind of building and for every place. So Berlin is going to look different from Battery Park City. Now you could say your Battery Park City scheme was not as good as your Berlin scheme, and money or no money, and I don't know what I'd say, except that I seemed to be right while we were doing it. And it'd be nice if bells could go off in some way that said to the architect and the client and the bankers, this isn't got it yet. And we're doing a project in Sweden presently that I was am very excited about and pleased with. I got a long poison pen letter the other day from a Swedish architect who said he had been by to see the drawings in an office in Sweden, and this didn't have any of the qualities which he listed that some of our other work had had. I thought it was the best thing we'd done yet, but he made some very, very little drawings that showed what a mess it was. I think my best bet is just to keep my chin up and plunge ahead. And with luck, we'll be right, and the man who wrote the letter will be wrong. The guys who wrote the letters about the Sea Ranch, I think, were all wet 25 years ago.
What about Battery Park City? That's your only New York project, right? Anything else in the city? Yeah. Did you find the design guidelines frustrating there? I mean, they're based on a philosophy that's not different from your own, yet
no, I thought
they may well have been difficult. I don't know.
I thought they were very sensible. And I like very much the notion. I've taught a number of classes in design guidelines since, and I'm pretty well convinced that what they did is the right thing, which is to have some model. They wanted it to look like the Upper West Side of New York City. And this is Battery Park City South, which is not the Caesar Palace big part, but
the residential part.
The residential part. So when we would make a scheme, we would ask ourselves, does this look like the Upper West Side? And I'd say, yeah, I think so. And then we would show it to them, and they would say, this doesn't look like the Upper West Side. And we'd mess with it. But we at least had some goal we could share. It took agreement, which it cheerfully got, that it was okay to make something look like the Upper West Side. And the fact that it had kind of variety and chance for surprise appealed to me, and apparently to Stan Exton and the people trying to make the scheme. And so I think it's fine.
Okay. In your recent essay, Inspiration for a New Architecture, in Riccardo Legoretta's monograph, you say, and the question quotes, The qualities that Ricardo Legorreta sees in vernacular building neatly describe a desirable architecture for the future, and the lessons are not for Mexican architecture alone either. What are the lessons for America and American architects?
I think, and probably as we've been saying, or I've been saying, I think that it's that lots of easy and pleasant things can fit into a vernacular architecture. In the United States, more than in Mexico, a whole wide variety of the Mexican stuff is particularly appealing to me, and I've spent a lot, as it is to Ricardo Legorreta, and I've spent a lot of time looking at it and photographing it. But many versions of the North American vernacular have a great deal of appeal too, and I think the lesson is that that there's a lot of it, that it takes all different shapes. It almost always has a very direct connection between the mind and the hand. As people think up, hey, wouldn't it be nice to have this window twice as high as the other ones? And they do it, or used to do it. Now they can't do it because some board will tell them that it's not the way we do it here. But that thing that Legorreta does so gracefully, it takes the elements of Mexican architecture and that are pretty easy and generally agreed on, and then does them with a little twist that makes it special but not freaky, is the same lesson that I think we architects and people who build buildings in all different parts of the United States could well enjoy. Almost everywhere in every section of the country has got some special things that people do, and do them with special feeling and a lot of local intensity, so that if you were familiar enough with it, you'd know the difference between buildings in one town on the Ohio River and buildings downstream in another town. More evident 100 years ago than now, certainly.
Who was your most difficult client? Why and how did you resolve it?
I suppose the most difficult ones are the ones that fired me, and
So they resolved it.
They resolved it. And there have been some of those. Every architect has some of those. I wonder if I should go into Wanda Tamasian. She was a stripper from Bangor, and she and her professor husband were building a house in California, and she would bring a huge kitchen knife to the meetings. This is long ago, when we would build lots of models, not just a few models, but lots of models. And every time I'd come with a new a cardboard model, she'd stab into it with this kitchen knife, and she was trying to suggest specific changes in the fenestration, but I found it nervous-making.
Did that house ever get built?
Yes, but it got built, he did a funny thing with the grading, and it got built under a very steep California unstable hill, and I've never dared go near it. No,
Any others to equal Wanda?
no, I don't think so. I've had some difficult clients for houses that did get built, but in the end, it was all worth it.
I've always been puzzled by Place d'Italie. I guess that means Piazza d'Italia in French. What was the stimulus for your design of this project? It's a project we didn't talk about earlier, but maybe you can say a word about it.
It was a project in New Orleans that came about because they were building various plazas and plazas and plazas to the predictable national groups. And the Place de France had Joan of Arc in a space about 10 feet wide in front of a building, and the Plaza de España had a whole block with fountains and things. And it turned out that a developer of Italian extraction was willing to give the city a 3/4 of a block around a building of his in return for some space at another site that he needed more. And that was fine with the city and fine with the developer, and became fine with a group of Italian businessmen who formed a committee to have the Piazza d'Italia. And there was a mayor's competition, typically, and we were a very close second to a local firm that of some prominence and prestige that won it. And the mayor asked me if I'd like to do the fountain in it, and I think I was supposed to say no, but I said sure. I'd love to do this fountain. And then it turned out that part of the New Orleans scene is that on the 18th of March, which is that right? I think so. It's St. Joseph's Day. A great altar of food is made, and all kinds of wonderful things. Giant sort of aspic crustaceans, pink, and stuff. And then little children play the parts of Jesus and Joseph and Mary. And then the people poorer than other people get all the food as soon as the play is over. And so that was the excuse for a scheme, which we did, having had something like that in the competition. And we worked very closely together, and the people there are still close friends. We realized we had to have it Italian, and we sat around thinking, now what is the most Italian thing we can think of? And I don't think it was I think it was somebody else who said, how about Italy? And so, yeah, Italy. And so we made the fountain in the shape of Italy. And then that started all sorts of possibilities. We were convinced that we wanted water to flow down the Po and the Arno and the Tiber. And that worked fine. And then I decided it'd be great to have tiki torches on Vesuvius and Etna. And the Italian businessmen said that was in bad taste. So we didn't have tiki torches on Vesuvius and Etna. Then we had to have more than just Italy to have enough going in this fountain, enough water.
You needed Sicily?
Sicily, everybody, 95% of people of Italian extraction in New Orleans are Sicilian. And so Sicily was the center of the whole deal. The rostrum to give speeches is on Sicily, and you can sit on Sardinia and listen. And then what could we have that would be an architectural sort of surround to this? And I'm pretty sure it was my idea that although we all did these things together, and I don't know who thought of it for sure, that the architectural orders, the classical orders, were sort of Italian with a little help from the Greeks, and some were pure Italian, and they would be fine. We could have water pouring out of Doric columns and Corinthian column capitals and all the rest, and there we had it. And it was one of my great pleasures because it was the kind of thing I couldn't believe they'd ever actually do. Right. And they did it.
It's gone through some ups and downs since, as I...
Mostly downs. The mayor who had encouraged it and whose name was associated with it stopped being mayor shortly after, just about the time it was finished, and his successor thought that anything that had to do with him was at best disgusting. And so it's had a negative amount of money spent on maintenance. And New Orleans water tends to clog up the pipes and fountains, and it's having been sucked out of the Mississippi for this purpose, so the fountains don't work, and the vandals, or people live. A lot of people have for a long time lived in the piazza, and some of them are cleanly, but most of them are not, and some of them are given to smashing things when they get drunk, and so it's been smashed up. And then the arts center, where somebody will get a positive desire to do something, and they'll go and clean it up and fix the broken pieces, and it'll look great for a couple days, and then there's no continuing system to keep it looking okay. So it, having started out life, highly praised by some, but not by all. When it was new, there were a number of taxi drivers in New Orleans that wouldn't take people to it when they said that's where they wanted to go. Y'all don't want to see that disgusting thing. And people had to cheat and had to ask for places nearby, but not that, to get rides. And more recently, it's been genuinely disgusting.
Is there any hope of restoration?
Well, the idea in the beginning, we got a little federal grant that was for making pieces of public furniture. And the idea then, and that's when it was built, 15, 17 years ago. And frequently since has been that a developer would develop the area around and then would take over the maintenance, since the city doesn't do things like that. And now there is a developer who is going to put a Ritz-Carlton hotel there, which is unfortunately, the last I knew, going to use the piazza as the drive up to the Port Cachere. And
with Italy intact, or
with Italy,
drive over the
Italy with a sort
drive
of
over. Well, that sort of makes
Michelin
it kind
pattern
of
on it.
Perfectly symbolic of Rome or something, isn't it? I mean, the thing becomes enveloped by cars.
More symbolic, they will say, of New Orleans, where Italians get dumped on all the time. And quite a few people do not like, including me, do not like the spectacle of our piazza under the wheels of the cars driving up to the Ritz-Carlton with their Franco-German chauffeurs and riders. So we write letters to the Times-Picayune. But we'll see. Something will happen. There'll probably be a lot of... Well, so far what there are movies, lots of them, with usually with a dead body in the piazza. The Big Easy had a body in the piazza that started it all off, and I suppose there will be more bodies in the piazza before it's over.
Sounds from the politics of it as if there already are. Doesn't that violate the agreement the city made, though, to make that a public square in exchange for the other land and all that?
Yes.
Okay. We've got time for just one or two more, I think. Do you think the French will relax? Maybe I should stop the question right there. Do you think the French will relax and respond favorably to Euro Disney? And actually, I might go beyond that and ask if you have done anything for Disney, given that you, as I said earlier, have written about Disneyland and certainly philosophically have might be expected to be among the cadre of architects doing work for Disney.
So far, I'm not. I've done some work with the Imagineers, who are the Disney in-house people who do things usually for the Magic Kingdoms. And I've done stuff with them, which has always run afoul of the next rank up, who are the real estate people from Orange County, California. And our stuff is not seen as suitable in Orange County terms for Paris, although it seems to us that it's very suitable in Parisian terms, but it just goes to show you how many points of view there are. In any case, we did a competition, which came to nothing, and are now doing another competition for a village near Disney World. And it hasn't been finished and presented yet. So we're hopeful that we'll get to do something in Florida. But so far, no Euro Disney tumbles have come.
What about the other part of the question? Do you think the French will respond? Is Disneyland going to work in France?
Off the record, I don't think so. I don't really know what will happen, but I understand the same request was made in Tokyo by the Japanese. I've never seen the Tokyo Disneyland, but the deal is, it's a very useful thing to observe. The deal is to make it American, so that the Japanese get to see what American life is like, and that's on the one hand probably disgusting, and on the other, it seems to me it violates the thing that Disneyland and Disney World in the United States are about, of making our own kaleidoscopic set of memories and senses of place into something that's under extraordinarily good control and is clean and neat and charming. And they're making it, in Japan it's exotic, and in France apparently the idea is to make it all like Orange County. And speaking as a sometimes resident of Southern California, I would like to say that I have no desire to go to Paris to see Orange County, which is closer.
But on the other hand, since you can now go to Orlando to see Paris, doesn't it all fit?
That's Epcot.
Right. Exactly.
Maybe it fits something, but it makes me very uneasy. I don't see why the French would be so excited about having Orange County visited upon them. It's bad enough in the suburbs of Paris without dumping Orange County on top of it.
Let me end with a general one. We'll give you a chance to say something sweeping and philosophical and epoch-making, if you want. As a teacher of architecture, what do you consider to be the crucial element in the training of an architect, and how much freedom should be allowed for the student to find his own way? Do your students, in fact, develop styles quite different from your own?
Taking the easy part, the final part first, yes, they develop styles quite different from my own, and I go to some lengths to try to ensure that they will, because it seems to me that the least desirable aspect of teaching architecture is to have a bunch of people come in and do stuff like my stuff, or for me to teach people to do stuff like my stuff, or to do stuff like anybody's stuff. I'm hoping that they'll find their own way within some limits of discretion and decency, and remembering that it's not the architect's way that matters, but the way of the people who are going to inhabit the place, and the places that all the students will do. And so my interest is in setting the stage for them to look at things and listen to people and do something finally that's for that those people, the inhabitants, can feel that they're inhabiting, can feel comfortable, and can feel that they've had something to do with. So I like very much to include the inhabitants in the work at hand, and I hope that at least some of my students will too. And when that happens, it's not going to look like my stuff, or even Lou Kahn's stuff, or anybody's who's happened so far.
Good. Wonderful last word. This has been great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks for listening. For more information on the 92nd Street Y, New York, and all of our programs, please visit us at 92ny.org.